2025 is expected to be a breakthrough year for India's economic rise to superpower status. India is once again forecasted to overtake Japan and become the fourth biggest global economy. Now behind only Germany in third, China remains in second spot, while the United States will continue to lead as the world's financial titan. At $4.3 trillion, India's GDP will be double that of Canada's at $2.1 trillion, placing it in 11th spot. New Delhi will be nearly 4 times that of Turkey's GDP of $1.1 trillion, which is in 17th spot. While Pakistan's GDP at $349 billion will remain 12 times smaller than its nemesis India. While the world economic growth forecast for India remains strong, there are also multiple hurdles as well. Worryingly, in the July-September quarter, India's economic growth had slowed to 5.4%, in contrast to the higher predictions made earlier by the IMF. The development prompted the RBI to lower its own growth forecast for 24-25 from 7.2% to 6.6%. Reports suggested it may also cut interest rates to stimulate demand. While rural demand benefiting from a good monsoon stays strong, the urban demand, however, had marginally fallen. Food prices, especially that of vegetables, remained high. But the data does indicate economic recovery in 2025, especially easing pressures of inflation. The government of India remains optimistic for 2025 as Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman stated how the GDP slowdown in September quarter was not systemic and the economic activity in the third quarter with better public expenditure is likely to compensate for the moderation. She reiterated, quote, "The purchasing power of Indians is improving, but within India, you also have concerns of wages saturating. We are quite seized of these factors which might have a play on India's consumption," unquote. Painting a brighter picture, the finance minister predicts third quarter growth during the festive period to offset the decline, as India will remain the fastest growing major economy despite hiccups on the way. Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal expects the economy to regain its momentum by March 2025, saying, quote, "The festive shopping, the rebound in rural growth, the ways banks are seeing traction again, the way infrastructure spending has come back on track. We will be back on track by the time we close this financial year in 2025, unquote. The long-term India growth story remains intact. India's micro-industries, which account for 45% of GDP, have recovered. The sector of salaried employees has witnessed improvement, while the female workforce participation has risen to 39.6% from 34.5% in 2018. India also continues to show resilience in certain pockets, be it consumption trends, services growth, and the rising share of high-value manufacturing products in exports. Deloitte claims manufacturing exports in high-value segments like electronics, semiconductors, and chemicals reflect India's strengthening position in the global value chain. In 2023-24, India's exports stood at $778 billion. The figure is expected to cross $800 billion in FY25, with the goal to reach $2 trillion in exports by 2030. The Indian government is also consistently focusing on the rapid expansion of infrastructure, with a substantial investment exceeding $100 trillion in roads, ports, railways, and other key areas. Another area contributing to India's growth is the travel sector. A growing middle class, increasing disposable incomes, and an increase in appetite for travel, both domestically and internationally, India is becoming a travel hotspot. India is also poised to sustain strong momentum in the quick commerce industry, as it has an anticipated compound annual growth rate of 50% in the coming years. With a top focus on Make in India campaign and self-reliance, India's defense expenditure has grown at 5.8% over the past decade, according to Nuvama Institutional Equities, to reach $84 billion in 2023. This will further accelerate to 8% over the next 5 years to hit $130 billion. However, the biggest uncertainty surrounds Donald Trump's return as the US president. Will he impose higher tariffs on India, along with the likes of China, Canada, and even Mexico? As per a report by Goldman Sachs on the 10th of December, the Indian economy is expected to remain relatively insulated against global shocks, including Trump's tariffs. Santanu Sengupta, the chief India economist at Goldman Sachs Research, writes, quote, "The structural long-term growth story for India remains intact, driven by favorable demographics and stable governance," unquote. It remains to be seen if India's emerging markets feel the pinch of Trump's protectionist trade policies and a stronger US dollar, which could lead to capital outflows and inflationary pressures. However, India remains one of the countries well positioned for Donald Trump's return as the US president. Even experts in Japan foresee India's rise to the top 4 spot. The Japan Times quoted the chief economist for Asia Pacific at S&P Global Ratings saying, quote, "There's no obvious reason why India should not be able to grow by 6% to 7% per year in real term." In 2023, Japan's economy was around 18% larger than India's. This year, the yen has depreciated significantly against the dollar, whereas the Indian rupee has barely budged against the greenback, unquote. So can India continue its rise to become the world's third biggest economy before 2030? Leave a comment with your opinion, hit the like button and subscribe to Inconnect News.